I am so thankful for Frank's fearlessness. That is a characteristic that sadly is in short supply in Washington, and it is something the men and women in this room embody and exercise on a daily basis. I also want to thank David Green and Sarah Stern for the indispensable contribution that Emmett gives to protecting and defending both America and the nation of Israel. And I would be remiss if I did not also acknowledge Victoria Coates, my national security advisor, who is a passionate defender of liberty and American exceptionalism, and I'm honored to work with her. You know, Washington is a town that focuses a great deal on politics. If you go to the original Greek, the etymology of the word, politics had two parts. Poly, meaning many, and ticks, meaning blood-sucking parasites. And that fairly accurately describes this town. I want to start by congratulating the others on this program, the recipients of the Ray of Light Award. For having the courage to tell the truth in this vital fight against radical Islamic terrorism. And what does it say that we have a President of the United States who is unable to utter the words radical Islamic terrorism? As we've sat here tonight and considered the careers of Congressman Lantos and his extraordinary daughter, that was phenomenal, and Congressman Duncan, and Brett Stevens and his powerful voice, and Reza Khalili, I am truly humbled to be in their midst and wondering what on earth you are doing, including a politician and freshman senator in that mix. Indeed, I'm reminded of one time I was on an airplane, and a voice came over the loudspeaker paging Tom Cruise. And somewhat sheepishly, I came to the front of the plane and said, I think possibly you might be looking for me. You have never seen so many disappointed flight attendants. Well, I may not be in the league with the other honorees tonight, but I am certainly honored and humbled to join them and to join you. The work that the Endowment for Middle East Truth does is so incredibly important. Spreading truth on Capitol Hill, a place it does not normally reside. And I have to say, Texans feel a special kinship with the nation of Israel. You know, I remember growing up in Texas, a seminal moment for me was the Entebbe raid. I was a kid at the time, and I remember the nation of Israel's response to terrorism and assault in the Entebbe raid. To me, what it said is, you may take Israelis hostage, and our citizens may lose their life if they are taken hostage. But you, the terrorist, you're going to die. And to a 5-year-old kid growing up in Houston, that was a very, very Texan approach to the matter. I have often wished U.S. foreign policy could discover a bit of the spinal fortitude of Israeli foreign policy. In the few months since I was elected to the Senate, I've been honored to take 2 trips to the nation of Israel. And just a couple of weeks ago, my father returned from the nation of Israel with a trip of pastors. And I'd like to comment on a similarity that I think is really quite striking between the United States and Israel that is not always noticed. You know, in my life, Frank generously talked about my experience as the son of an immigrant. 55 years ago, my dad fled from Cuba. He had been imprisoned, he had been tortured as a kid in Cuba, thrown in a Cuban jail, beaten almost to death. And when my dad came to Texas in 1957, he was 18, he couldn't speak English, he had $100 sewn into his underwear. And he washed dishes making 50 cents an hour to pay his way through the University of Texas, to get a job, to start a business, and to work towards the American dream. Now, my whole life, my dad's been my hero. But the most extraordinary thing I find about his story is how commonplace it is. Every one of us in this room has a story just like that. We are a nation where all of us are the children of those who risked everything for liberty. And the very same thing is true about the nation of Israel. The fundamental DNA of what it means to be an American, I am convinced, is to value liberty and opportunity above all else. And that founding principle is the principle that animates the nation of Israel as well. I will note that Texas and Israel have many shared economic connections, including most recently we saw a natural gas production platform constructed by Houston-based Noble Energy in the Tamar natural gas field off the coast of Israel. Prime Minister Netanyahu rightly called the discovery of those natural gas fields manna from heaven. And I hope our government here in the United States can likewise recognize the manna from heaven of developing our resources. So that the United States and Israel can, I hope, one day soon no longer be dependent and beholden to other nations and nations that hate us. For our energy supplies. And while we're at it, let me suggest a radical principle for Washington. Let's stop giving weapons to people who hate us. It is only in the Beltway that that is considered anything other than blazingly obvious. You know, when I was in Israel, I had the chance to visit Rafael Industries. And I will note my father's name is Rafael Cruz, my name is Rafael Cruz. I was truly impressed that they went out of their way to welcome me by naming the entire operation after my dad and my grandfather. That was really powerful. But, you know, it was shortly after the incredible rocket attacks we saw at the end of last year. And it was absolutely amazing to see the effectiveness of the Iron Dome missile defense system in protecting Israel. Iron Dome, during those attacks, shot down 421 rockets, an 84% success rate. And I couldn't help but thinking back to the 1980s. We just recently had the anniversary, the 30th anniversary of President Reagan's SDI speech. How many of y'all remember the liberal intelligentsia deriding that as Star Wars? Some crazy cowboy, that's like a bullet hitting a bullet, we were told. Can't be done. 84% of the rockets that came into Israel were hit by the Iron Dome system, and men, women, and children did not lose their lives as a result. In fact, I would encourage any of you, if you haven't seen it, to go home tonight and Google the following phrase: Iron Dome wedding. It's a phenomenal video of a wedding that was occurring in Israel when a rocket attack starts. And the person who was filming the wedding on the video camera just turned up to the sky. And you see one missile after another intercepted with Iron Dome rockets. And it's like fireworks in the sky with the wedding music in the background. It is an extraordinary video. I would encourage you to watch it. It needs no commentary. You just watch it, and it underscores one of the many ways the alliance between Israel and the United States is so vital, as they are testing and implementing technology to defend themselves, and at the same time technology that's vital to defend the United States of America. In my view, and I know the view of everyone in this room, the U.S.-Israeli alliance should remain utterly and completely unshakable. And I'll tell you, nothing right now illustrates the importance of that to U.S. national security more than the situation in the nation of Iran. In my view, the threat of Iran acquiring nuclear weapons capability is the single gravest national security threat to the United States and the entire world. And I tell you, when I travel Texas and people ask, what are we going to do to prevent Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons capacity? The truth of the matter is, I have grave doubts that this administration is going to do much of anything. And I have even graver doubts that the mullahs in Iran believe this administration is going to do butkus. Butkus is a technical term. But what I have shared to Texans all across our state is I have great comfort that if the best intelligence estimates suggest that Iran is on the verge of acquiring nuclear weapons capability, I have absolute confidence the nation of Israel will stand up and defend herself. And in taking out that nuclear weapons capability, Israel could not do a greater service to the national security interest of the United States. Now, frankly, Israel shouldn't have to. We should be willing to get up and defend ourselves. But I'm grateful for support from wherever it comes. You know, I know Sarah's been a longtime admirer of President Reagan's formidable ambassador to the United Nations, Jeane Kirkpatrick. And I'm told Ambassador Kirkpatrick was a big fan of Sarah's as well. Oh, that I wish the President would send an ambassador to the United Nations like Jeane Kirkpatrick. And not so much like the good Professor Power. How different things are today. Just today, standing on the east side of the Brandenburg Gate, President Obama gave an extraordinary speech. I think it was fitting he was on the east side of the gate. An extraordinary speech where he gave a celebration of, quote, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. He called upon the world to, quote, care about more than just our own self-comfort, about our own city, about our own country. What a foolish and provincial idea to care about your own country. No, he said, he demanded that we instead, quote, embrace the common endeavor of humanity. For, quote, we are not only citizens of America or Germany, we are also citizens of the world. Standing at the Brandenburg Gate. It's a wonder lightning didn't strike the man. The irony, of course, was that President Obama was able to stand on what was the Soviet side of the Brandenburg Gate and talk about global peace and justice because of the strength of the very nuclear arsenal that he is working to dismantle. when the president claimed that at the end of the Cold War, quote, openness won, tolerance won, and freedom won here in Berlin. No, they didn't. The United States of America won. The Berlin Wall did not simply come tumbling down because openness and tolerance and kumbaya surrounded it as folks in flowers sung outside the wall. The Berlin Wall came down because we had an American president with the moral clarity to say our policy towards the Soviet Union can be reflected in one simple formula. We win, they lose. We had a president with the moral clarity to say that the Soviet Union was an evil empire and Marxism, Leninism would end up on the ash heap of history. And we had a president that had the courage to go to West Berlin, stand before that gate, and demand of a totalitarian leader the most important words uttered by a leader in modern times: Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. Now, obviously, the world has changed from a Cold War world between two superpowers. And yet I think it's fair to ask, are the totalitarian aspiring nuclear states in Iran and North Korea philosophically all that far removed from the Soviet Union? Are 21st century tyrants fundamentally different? Will they be persuaded, as President Obama suggests, to reject their ambitions and instead to embrace, quote, the new international framework for peaceful nuclear power? You know, if there's one principle that has been true through time immemorial, it is that tyrants and bullies do not respect weakness or appeasement. We need American leaders at the United Nations, at the State Department, and most especially at the White House, who clearly understand that America and Israel are not what's wrong with the world. What's wrong with the world right now is ceding moral and legal authority and sovereignty to a United Nations that passes resolution after resolution condemning a democratic Israel and yet turns a blind eye to the human rights violations in China and Iran and Cuba. What's wrong with the world is failing to understand that the enemy that fires thousands of rockets into Israel is the very same enemy that attacked us at Fort Hood. And calling it, quote, workplace violence won't make it any less deadly. I will note this morning in the Judiciary Committee, the director of the FBI testified. And I asked the director, why is it that this administration has been so poor in connecting the dots, whether with the Boston bombing, with the Fort Hood murderer, where the FBI had ample information about what was happening with the Tsarnaev brothers. We were told by Russia. And yet, was it that political correctness prevented the law enforcement officials of the United States from actually tracking down those leads and stopping violent terrorists we knew about before they killed innocents? I'm sorry to say his answer with respect to Major Hassan when I asked that the FBI had emails with al-Awlaki going back and forth about radical jihad, where Major Hassan asks about killing fellow service members, and the answer that was given was, well, at the time we assessed al-Awlaki as only proselytizing radical Islam. It wasn't operational terrorism, so we weren't concerned. I got to say that's a view that really misunderstands cause and effect. Proselytizing radical Islam to a major in the Army is fundamentally dangerous, and the idea that our national security apparatus said, no concern, is deeply troubling. What's wrong in the world is letting the terrorist attacks on 4 Americans in Benghazi go unavenged for more than 9 months. You know, at the time, the president said, we will track down those who have done this. Who exactly has been tracked down? What's wrong in the world is celebrating a so-called Iranian election that really means the status quo selected by their so-called supreme leader. While the mullahs in Tehran pursue nuclear capability to target the United States and Israel. And what's wrong in the world are regimes from Tehran to Cairo that permit or even encourage the continued persecution and murder of Christians and Jews. The table tonight, the woman I was sitting next to brought up Alan Gross, who's languished in a Cuban prison. She talked about the desperation, the desolation, the loneliness of his wife as her husband seems forgotten. Why is the president talking about being a citizen of the world instead of being the president of the United States and defending U.S. citizens in hellholes? But as disturbing as all of that is, what is right is the rock-solid alliance and partnership between the United States and Israel. What is right is the foundation of this organization, the commitment of the men and women here to tell the truth, because the truth clarifies. We are blessed to be standing together, working to tell the truth, and I am convinced more and more Americans are standing with us to get back to the founding principles of this country, to get back to liberty, to stand once again in defense of the United States, in defense of our Constitution, in defense of this great nation as that shining city on a hill that it is and was and will be for generations to come. Thank you, and God bless you.